Mother Knows Death, starring Nicole and Jemmy and Maria Q. Kane.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, Tom Smith, who is a retired NYPD police detective and one of the co-hosts of the Gold Shields podcast. Today, we're going to do some news stories with Tom and ask him all of the police questions that we're dying to know with the latest news stories, like Weezer's bassist wife being involved in a police shootout, a baby being mauled to death by their family dog, a case of necrophilia, yes, in a New York City subway, and the arsonist at Governor Shapiro's mansion. All that and more on today's episode. Hi, Tom. Thanks so much for being here today.
Oh, my God. Talk about waiting for a show to do. We scheduled this, and ever since then, especially after we did ours, it's been all right, 3 more days, 2 more days. It's tomorrow. So I'm thrilled to be here, and thank you so much for having me. And this is going to be cool.
So why don't you tell everyone what the podcast is about? Because we did tell our listeners to listen to our episode. Well, listen to them all the time, but listen especially to Maria and I's episode that was on last week. But tell everybody a little bit about what you guys are doing on the podcast.
So what we do is Dan and I are both retired NYPD detectives who did combined 50 years in the NYPD. Dan was my sergeant and partner in a couple of different details that we were on together. And what we wanted to do was get these stories out there that people might know about, but not really know about. And these high profile cases and military missions, but get a kind of backstory to them. So what we did is we have the guests on who actually did them, the detectives, the SEAL Team 6 operators, victims of crimes, to tell their own story about what happened with the case. And a lot of times the feedback we get is, wow, I knew about the case, but I didn't know that. Or I didn't know that much about it, which is the point of it. That's what we want to do. And Dan and I were very intent on not telling someone else's story. You know, let the person who went through it and did it tell their own story. And that's basically what it is. You know, we all get kind of pigeonholed into a genre, and true crime we are. But I always like to tell everyone we're more of a true story podcast than that, because of the stories we hear blow our mind a lot with what we hear, because we don't have a script. You know, we just kind of have conversations, and a lot of the information coming about these cases we never heard about. So the reactions are pretty authentic with Dan and I being blown away sometimes. So it's been a great ride, and we just love doing it.
Well, we commonly find when we're looking up news stories that maybe one news source like NBC writes something and basically every other news source just copies what they wrote, essentially. So I could see that you would want to get stories from other people because they're not really digging much deeper on a lot of these cases.
Right. They're satisfied with the oh wow headline, or, you know, the dramatic, you know, just face story of what it is, but don't go into why it is and what happened and the particulars about it, which are more interesting than just a headline. And that's what we wanted to do with it. You know, we got all the time comments of, you know, I knew about that military mission because I read about it, whatever, but had no idea about A, B, and C. And that's the point of it. And that's what, you know, we keep hearing that. That's what keeps driving us to get more of these stories out there.
So what are some of the high profile cases that you've covered and had interviews?
Oh boy. We did the Scott Peterson case. We had the detective who actually locked Scott Peterson up. So we talked about that. Oh God. Ted Bundy's a victim of Ted Bundy. Kathy Kleiner
Wow.
Rubin, who survived an attack by Ted Bundy. We had her on. The Night Stalker, you know, Gil Carrera, who locked him up, was on. And that was a chilling episode of hearing the integral parts of going after a serial killer. You know, we read about them, we see movies on it, but to get a firsthand account of how to do it was a great episode.
Yeah, and I just listened to your Vegas shooter episode too, and I think that's the case, you know. I was all over watching the news, but hearing your guys' episode and just the first person point of view about what went down that day, it's just so much more compelling, like we're talking about, than reading it just online or seeing it covered on TV, because you just really have no idea what it's like unless you're there.
100%. Josh was amazing. That was, you know, one of those that Dan and I just shut up and just let Josh talk and tell the story. And that was one of those, you know, that you remember recently. You know, the other ones were a few years ago, and that one's still fresh in everyone's mind. So to hear that reaction, and we've all been there, you know, and I think I said it in the show, Maria, that, you know, cops, you could be sitting around doing nothing, laughing, joking, and 30 seconds later, the world is ending. And that's police work. And that's what Josh kind of put out there of training with the dogs, and you got your uniform shirt off, and it's a nice day. And then all of a sudden, it looks like Armageddon.
Yeah, and I believe you made a really good point on that episode too, or maybe it was at our dinner last week, but you had said something along the lines of like, these things sometimes happen to somebody. These traumatic things only occur to people one time, but for police officers in particular, this is just another day at work. And sometimes they have 1, 2, 3 scenes this traumatic in a day. And I
Oh, yeah.
can't imagine how hard that is to process.
Right. You know, the average person will have 3 to 4, maybe 5 traumatic events in their lifetime. I could literally have, you know, 10 in a night, you know, when I was on patrol, you know, just constantly going to 911 calls and tragedies and all that. You could literally, you know, just have that number in one tour, in one night, and add that up over a career. And that's why, you know, this job is so demanding, both physically and mentally.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
and it's cool because I mean, when you think about being a new working in New York and being a detective there, most people would be exposed to a lot of crazy shit there. Like just because like one of the stories we're going to talk about today is just enough to be like, okay, these people are seeing some crazy stuff, but even smaller departments, like they never know what they're going to come across either. So it's cool that you're interviewing people from all over to just get this different perspectives on where they're working and what the population's like and how populated it is. Like Vegas, for example, has a lot of tourists and New York does too. But where I live, like, no, that's not even a thing on their mind. So it's just cool to get a perspective from all different law enforcement officers.
Yeah, you know, when we started and we first put it out there, a lot of people were under the impression that we were just doing NYPD stories just because of the name of the show and where Dan and I are from. And we were like, not even close. I mean, in 115 shows that we've done, we've maybe done 4 NYPD shows. And that just goes to your example, Nicole, that these stories of great investigations and traumatic events and all that are all over the country. And we've had so many with, like you said, small towns or smaller police departments that, you know, these heroic events happen with cops getting shot and or saving lives or all that. And that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to make it a nationwide and worldwide show. And luckily we are so far.
So, all right. So talking about getting shot, this is good for our first story because this is a super bizarre one that came out this week. Ray, do you want to get into it?
Yeah, so Jillian Lauren Schreiner, who is the wife of Weezer's bassist Scott Schreiner, she was in this incredibly strange situation last week where she ended up getting in this police shootout. I mean, the details of this story are just so bizarre.
So she wasn't involved at all, and I guess the person that was accused of doing a hit and run had just ran away from the scene and went into one of her neighbor's yards or something.
Yeah, it appears there was some sort of police, chase going on from a hit and run incident, and these suspects had ended up in her neighborhood. And by the time the police got there, they found her with a 9mm on her porch, and they had said to her multiple times, "Please put your gun down." And then, according to the police, she shot at them, and then they shot at her. She ended up getting shot in the shoulder. But it's all over the place with what actually went down, and why was she even involved in this in the first place? I am thinking, if I had a weapon and the police officer was telling me to put it down, of course I would. But she's saying she was defending her home, and I don't really know, what was going on there?
Yeah, that was a bizarre story to read about and do some checking on. And what it seems that happened was, she had a gun in the house and she's protecting herself and probably just heard someone in the backyard walking around, went out to take a look, and the worst case scenario happens. It's at night. She probably couldn't see who it was. She doesn't trust someone just yelling the police. And without surveying what's going on and taking a second, just start shooting. And the police are in that area looking for, I think, a carjacker or something to that effect. So they're already amped up looking for someone that might have a weapon. Now someone pops up in front of you with a weapon and starts shooting at you. So that's the worst case scenario you can think of. And you know what? She's lucky she's still alive, with what could have happened. But that's scary situations when you run into people who are armed, whether they have a permit or not, and they're defending their home or whatever. But the biggest part is no matter what permit you have, you're usually not trained enough to deal with a situation like that, of how to do it, how to talk, how to recognize police officers, and all that. So I think that also played a contributing factor into what happened.
So I have a question because I think about this often when you hear about people who are carrying. I personally feel like I know all the steps that you have to go through it are pretty vigorous. A person that's concealed carry, like legit permit and everything. As a law enforcement officer, do you feel better knowing that there's people that are armed around that could potentially help you guys in a situation? Or do you hate the fact that regular people are carrying weapons?
Listen, I firmly believe that everyone should have the right to do it, obviously, and protect yourself and your family and all that. But I think the level of training that needs to be done has to be ramped up because, you're talking about you can be 21 years old and get a permit and go to a training session and take a couple of shots at a paper target and get a permit and have a gun. I've had conversations with people of, do you understand what goes with that permit? Yeah, I get to carry a gun. No, you could potentially kill someone. Oh, I don't want that. No, that's part of it. And they think it's kind of cool that they can have a gun and carry it and protect themselves, but don't understand what can happen, and what could very easily happen going down the line. And when I start having conversations with people like that, they freak out of, wait, I didn't sign up for that. I don't want to kill anyone. Okay, but you may have to, and that parallel of yeah, that's reality, it kind of hits people hard sometimes.
Is it weird that I would just assume if you're getting a gun, that's what you're getting it for. Like, what else are you using it for? To scare somebody? Because that's definitely a terrible idea.
It's a horrible idea. And that's where you get into, the mindsets of people of, is it fashionable? It's cool. I have one. Listen, that's a mindset. Unfortunately, in this world today, yeah, it's cool to have a gun, but they're not taking that extra step of the responsibility of it and the ramifications of that responsibility if you happen to screw up. Just because you have a permit doesn't mean you can't be wrong and you can't go to jail. And people think that is, well, it's not an illegal gun. Yeah, but your actions can be. And that's what people lose sometimes when it comes to arming themselves.
Yeah, and I feel like in this case, I mean, she got arrested for attempted murder, so I guess she actually took shots at the officers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what I mean. The misidentification of police officers who were yelling at her, "We're the police, we're the police." Whether they were in plain clothes, I don't know what they were dressed like, if they had their uniforms on, if they had a identifying markings on them. I don't know at that point. But, that's part of the training of it, of taking that second to survey a situation and to, understand if they're a cop, they control the scene, not you. They're in charge. And you're the civilian with the gun. So I think the communications broke down, and trusting who was in her backyard is part of the problem as well. And that, like I said, is a worst case scenario. That's a nightmare for both parties. for both parties to be involved in.
Yeah, I
Do
mean,
you-
that could have turned ugly, right?
Yeah.
Well, I saw that she had just had a hysterectomy recently, and she had been being treated for cancer. So, do you think there was? I don't know. I'm just trying to think of all possible situations.
What,
Is
that her
there?
ovaries got taken out and she went nuts?
Well,
No,
well,
that's
no, I'm not saying about the hysterectomy, but do you think because of the combination of having treatment for cancer and having the surgery, there was some type of brain fog that could have affected her decision making? I mean, I don't know. I'm asking you as a medical person if that's a possibility.
I mean, she had the surgery over a month ago. I would say no. Like what Tom just said with the officers potentially wearing street clothes. I mean, think about that. Like, if I'm just thinking about looking in my own backyard, if there's a bunch of guys wearing normal clothes carrying guns in my yard, I'm going to be like on high alert.
But are you going to
scared to
shoot
death.
at them?
Well, I don't have a gun, but if I did, for reasons like this, because I don't think I would make the right decision in that time. But for real, like I would be on high alert. I definitely would call 911 and like. But there's people on my street that might have a gun that might do something. You understand? Like I see that would freak her out.
Do you think it's also possible she misfired because most times people have such horrible trigger discipline when they're holding a gun, and I feel like that's an incredible possibility that she was scared she was holding it and slipped.
Sure. That goes with what I said before, Maria, with training, and it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be one time. Like, all right, I'm gonna go get trained because I'm getting my permit. It should be a 2-3 time a year, training session that you should be on, because those scenarios can happen. Maybe not to that extreme, but being on the street. And Nicole, you bring up a great point with plainclothes officers, and I worked in there. I was in an anti-crime unit in plainclothes and got surrounded by 3 radio cars, NYPD cars, thinking we were a robbery team. That happens, and it's scary. Not to mention just being a civilian and seeing people walking through your backyard. But you came up with a great point too. Run inside, lock the door, call 911. Hey, there's people in my backyard saying they're cops, and that 911 operator is going, yes, they are. They're looking for A, B, and C. So that's another avenue she could have went down. But the stress of it, clouds people's judgment sometimes and reactions. So I think that had something to do with it as well.
Do you also see this little interesting tidbit that
I
she
was
was
just gonna
very
say
close
this.
with this serial killer, Samuel Little? I think she owns his, or not owns his, but I think she acquired his cremains after he died in 2020. But she had been making this documentary about Samuel Little, and the way these articles are reading is that it was supposed to highlight, the victims and be to their benefit. But then this woman ended up developing this really close friendship with him to the point where he put her as his next of kin on his prison paperwork.
It's very bizarre. But I feel like I've never heard of this guy. And apparently he's like one of the most prolific serial killers in the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, have you heard of him?
No.
So-
What were the circumstances of his case? That might be. I don't know his name, but the case.
I believe he is convicted of killing at least 8 women in between 1970 and I think the early 2000s, but then it came out later that he admitted to killing up to 93 victims.
But the
I don't know if
FBI
that's been
confirmed
confirmed.
the FBI confirmed 50 of the 93.
Oh my
Where-
god.
So it's a lot of people. It's just kind of like, I'm like, oh, why is this the first time I'm hearing about this?
I also
Yeah, really.
I
Yeah,
also
that's
thought
someone
it
to
was-
fall in love with.
Yeah, right.
Of
definitely.
course.
I also thought it was kind of strange that, she's getting charged with attempted murder, I'm assuming, of police officers, and then she got released on bond that night. I would just think for that level of a charge that you wouldn't be able to.
Well, welcome to the 2025
exactly.
criminal justice system.
Could tell you 10 cases this week
Sure.
of that happening.
Really.
And then her husband was at Coachella.
That's the bad part. That doesn't even surprise me anymore.
Yeah.
You're just like, whatever. Like
Yep.
that's totally normal now. All right. So here's a case that the next case shouldn't surprise you either, because I feel like we talk about it at least once a month on this podcast. We don't even cover every story, but
No, so this happened in Alabama. This couple had brought their 4-year-old to the hospital after he accidentally shot himself with a weapon in the house. So then police go to search the home. Not only do they find all these unsecured weapons, but they come across at least 30 snakes, some alive, some dead, covered in maggots, boxes of mice, and a crocodile in the home.
So this is something we talk about on this show all the time, is like, what is it like to just be a cop and walk into the house not knowing what to expect? Because you probably just live in a normal house that has just like furniture and stuff like that, and then you just go into these abnormal living situations.
Oh, that was, any apartment that you would go into in the city, you held your breath because anything could happen. I read this article and I remembered we took a case down in the Bronx in narcotics. So, a couple of different streets, a bunch of people arrested with this one crew, and one of them had an alligator in the bathtub when we did the warrant, and we're all on the street and we hearing, what's going on, and you're thinking it's a joke, and it wasn't. In the Bronx, an alligator in the bathtub. But other situations, I mean, walking in and just seeing weird stuff, shrines of a lot of different things that would be in certain rooms and all that. But you have to be, that's one of the things about working in a big city, especially a city like New York, where anything is possible. You have to be ready for every situation or every weird thing that could happen walking into an apartment.
So Gabe's friends with an older retired FDNY guy, and he showed me a picture once, and it's just an apartment building, right? And Gabe's just like, just zoom in on the window, and there's a freaking tiger, like a tiger you would see at the zoo in an apartment in New York City. Just like it's so outrageous to think that you guys would ever encounter something like that. It's just so wild.
Yep. And a lot of us, like I just said, I'll say it calmly because it's like, it's New York. There's nothing surprising anymore. And you get to a point in your career that nothing surprises you. Very rarely would you go, oh my God, that happened. No, you would just like kind of shrug it like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. So you gotta be ready.
What do you do in that case? You have to call animal control to secure it before further pursuing the scene?
Yeah, the first thing is you close the door and get out.
I was going to say, like,
do
do any of your guys like really freak out and just say like, like I know some guys that just have irrational fears of animals. Like one of our friends is like scared to death of sharks. Like you really could just like avoid that. Like, I'm not going in there. No way. Like a spider thing or whatever. Like that's where I draw the line. I'm not doing that.
Oh yeah, it could be anything. I mean, I know numerous cops who are scared of dogs, and that creates a problem when that happens. So the fear of something, the first thing is just get out. Whether it's an alligator or a tiger or, an eagle flying around an apartment, all weird stuff like that.
That sounds a little specific.
is just get out, close the door, and call like animal control. Or, there's times that you look around at each other and be like, who do we call? Like, is there a tiger removal department in New York City? But an animal control of some sort would come and take care of it.
Wow. So the main part of this story, which should be the most shocking, which isn't, is that a kid shot himself with a gun that was laying around. Is that something that you encountered through your career? Or do you think it's getting worse? Because I feel like I hear it a lot.
Yeah, because there's so many guns out there. I mean, there are, whether they're legal or not. The biggest thing about having a weapon in your house is where it's stored and where it's locked up and who has access to it. And a lot of people disregard that and they just leave it out. And kids end up killing themselves the majority of the time, or shooting a friend because they think it's a toy, or something like that. And that is usually the case with this. And those are I mean, you can't get more heartbreaking than that scenario, either one of those that I laid out. And that does happen. And it goes back to the parents' responsibility. The kid's a kid, the parents' responsibility or lack of responsibility when having these weapons in a house is tragic sometimes.
And this is kind of similar to our next story in a way that parents having their child either seriously injured or hurt, and it's kind of their fault. They put the danger into the house. Like, I don't even know how you live with yourself after something like that.
Right. Well, that decision, that a perfect point, Nicole, that scenario should be played out before you bring a weapon in the house. Play out that what if. What if he gets it? What if something goes wrong? What if, and people don't. They just take it for granted that, oh, well, it'll be all right. He's not going to get it. Or I hit it. I hit it in a spot. Listen, we were all kids. We find anything.
Yeah, exactly.
Just ask us around Christmas time. We find anything. If they have a thought that that's in the house, kids can find anything and get into anything. So unless it is a bolted down, secure combination lock box, they're going to find it.
I think my kids are broken. I say this at Christmas time. I keep their presents like unwrapped in my office, just like hidden under a couch or something, and they just don't even find it. I'm so disappointed.
Never.
I'm just like, I had that shit unwrapped, looked at it, rewrapped it, put it back in my mom's closet.
Well, last year we hid it behind the curtain for the window. They did it for months.
Like all
they
the
don't
time.
Find anything.
Or on the back porch, we'll just put it back there. They take the trash out all the time, walk right by the box, don't even notice it. You're just like, oh, how is this? What kind of kids are you?
This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Guys, the Gross Room is going on sale. It only goes on sale a couple times a year, and I'm so excited for you to join if you're not already a member. We have some really awesome things coming up. In this episode, we're talking about that case in necrophilia, so I thought that this would be a perfect time to really dive deep into this subject, into the Gross Room, because it is a pretty interesting subject. We do have a couple cases in there already, real life cases, so it is super disturbing, but we have lots of disturbing things. Also, Easter's coming up this weekend, and we have a post from last year, a high-profile death dissection talking about the crucifixion and if it was medically possible to happen. And we look at different forensics and proof of that happening. So it's pretty interesting, high-profile death dissection. So check that out.
Yeah, head over to thegrossroom.com now to sign up for $20 for 1 year of gross.
All right, so talk about this with the parents, though, because this next case, so this case and then the next one we're talking about is not having a gun, but having a dog that's known for eating children. So,
well, we talk about this a lot with dogs attacking children, especially with pit bulls, which is some of the greatest criticism I guess we face is criticizing people for having these dogs in the house with small children. But again, this is a case of a 7-month-old baby that was mauled to death by the family dog. They had 3 pit bulls at the house, and when animal control got there, they didn't know exactly which dog did it at first, and they determined which dog did it. Now that dog has to get euthanized, which isn't fair to the baby that lost its life, isn't fair to the dog that was just being an animal.
And then the people that own the dog don't get in the trouble. That's the weirdest part of it.
Yeah. I mean, dogs are, when it comes to that, you kind of different topics, different items, but sort of the same thing. You have a possible deadly weapon, which is a dog, right near your children, and they can turn in a minute. They're animals. They can be trained. Oh, I love them. They sleep with me. They're all this, but there's some animals that just have this trigger and they just go off, and you can't map it out. You can't schedule it. You can't see it coming, and it just happens. Moreover with this, when you have a history of these dogs, creating a problem is even more of a alert, to go out of, maybe not have them around the kids.
So you're saying that sometimes there's officers that would be scared of dogs. I personally would be too, as far as if I'm going over a friend's house that I know that the dog's well taken care of and I know what kind of environment they live in, I would be like way more chill about it. But just going into a stranger's house where you don't know how they're training this dog or what's happening, like what do your officers do in that situation? I mean, I guess they have a gun on them, so that's always helpful.
Yeah, you go first. That's you. That's in the hallway. All right, go ahead. You go. I'll stay out here. is usually how it happens. But sometimes you don't know they're there, and they'll come out of a bedroom, or they'll come out, out of another closet, whatever it might be. So sometimes you're caught off guard with seeing them. When we would do search warrants, you really didn't know. So we had a lieutenant that would always do a search warrant with treats and dog food in his pocket.
Oh, wow.
He had it every search warrant we did, just in case there was a dog there. He'd throw him a bone, throw him a treat, throw food in another room, whatever it was. Because listen, no one, especially pit bulls, you do not want to get bit by that. And you don't want to listen. No one wants to fire their weapon, whether it's at a person or a dog. You don't want to do it. So you just do everything you can to avoid that situation. But sometimes it's unavoidable. And, it's going to be them, not you, because I've seen guys bit by dogs and it is not cool. It's not pretty. It's painful as hell. And you don't want to go through that.
And what happens when you guys, like, obviously we talk about such horrible stories on here. We have another one coming up after this story of just officers seeing like terrible shit. So they're going to show up to this house, and let's say, I mean, most of these guys, I know that Gabe has this issue, when he goes to fires that involve children, because it's like he has kids that age too, and you can't help but say it's a similar situation because kids that age, right? And so if you walk into a scene like that and you see a baby that is the victim of being killed by a pit bull, which could be so gruesome, how do you deal with that with the officers? Do they have any kind of assistance for them when they get back? Do they have to go to some kind of therapy, or is that something they just take home with them?
Well, you would hope listen, people deal with stresses and situations like that differently. Some guys and women can handle it and just kind of put it in the back of their head of part of the job, another day, but it adds up. And that's where it's not, when it comes to the mental health issues of police officers and talking to people, it's not one event. It's always more and more and adding up. And that's when you have to know and realize when it's time to talk to someone, unofficially, officially, whatever it might be. But things in police departments and police officers boil to a point that they can't take it anymore. That's when bad things start to happen. That's when alcoholism starts and suicide starts and domestic issues start. When you get to these events just boiling over because you didn't realize when it was time to go talk to someone.
So what year did you start being a cop?
1990.
So you've seen a huge change in that like a shift in the thinking of that, because we've talked about that before, that you used to have to put on almost a front, like nothing bothered you guys. And now how do you feel about that being more open? You think that, obviously that should be better for most people, right?
Oh, it's about time. We were of the age, which was wrong, but it was the time it was of, hey, you're a cop, deal with it. And that was it. It's your job. We used to hear that all the time. And the problem at the time was the ramifications of it. If you went to someone and said, I have a problem, I have a mental health issue, whatever it might be, your gun was taken, your shield was taken, you were put on a midnight shift watching a parking lot. That's what it was. You weren't a cop anymore. You weren't technically, but you weren't. And that's what worried people in the police department of, I don't want, that to happen to me. I love being a cop. Just because I saw something one day, I'll just keep it to myself. But like I said, we have so many traumatic events that happen in just the course of a day. It's going to get to a point where you just can't take it anymore. And sometimes that's too late. So I'm thrilled that there's more mental health avenues out there that they can seek help and talk to someone in different organizations that are out there now, other than when I was on. And I just hope that they take advantage of it and get that help, because sometimes all it takes is one conversation and this is what I went through. Hey, do this, call me back next week. And, things can feel better. And, we do talk about it on our show all the time of the organizations that we're involved in, outreaching to departments to make sure that everyone's okay.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that because a lot of times people that work in this field don't have someone to go home to and talk to about it, and sometimes that's not even enough. So it is nice to hear that at least they're offering those resources to people now. Um, so this next story that we have involves not exactly a police officer walking in with his own eyes or her own eyes and seeing something horrific, but the talk of we talk about this of looking over surveillance films, or sometimes we hear about these horrible child pornography cases where police have to look through people's phones and see this shit, which is disturbing. So Maria, do you want to talk about this next case?
Yeah, so police were contacted when the conductor of this R train in New York City found this 37-year-old man who was dead. So, of course, they're like, we got to look through all the security footage and see exactly what happened. So they figured out that he got on the train 4 hours before they found him. At some point during this, he passed away. And then after he was dead, somebody not only robbed him, but then another person sexually assaulted his dead body. And so now they have to try to find these two separate people that went after a corpse on the train.
Like, what's happening in New York right now, Tom? Like, seriously.
You couldn't put that as a script in a movie. I
Yeah,
mean,
right?
look, it's happening. But listen, there's wingnuts out there. That's it. It's just wild, weird people out there that have no guardrails, no bounds, no mental acuity, no, just this is what I'm doing. That's it.
What is it about the subway? It's the subway that's like it tracks them, it seems.
Yeah, because the New York City subway is just a horror movie. That's why. You know, it's Escape from New York. It's a horror movie, and that's what it is. And the most unfortunate part of what I just said, 90% of people that are in the subway are good, hardworking people just trying to get to work. But you're surrounded by this just dwellers of whatever they are. You just explained two of them. The robbery part I get. That's happened many times. Either people sleeping or dead. I haven't heard of that often, but people sleeping and getting robbed was endless. That happened all the time. That was unless you were out of your mind, you didn't fall asleep. You didn't close your eyes, you didn't do anything. That was a rule. But people did because of working late or whatever it might be. But robberies that happen with people sleeping was an ongoing thing.
She's probably so skeeved out because she probably thought the dude was sleeping and felt his pockets and stuff. And now she's like, oh my God, he was dead. I touched a dead person.
It's a wild assumption that person even cares if the person was dead or alive, if they're going to just like pickpocket somebody on the train.
Yeah.
No, that's no level compared to putting this other guy took his body out of the seat and put him on the floor and had sex with him. Like,
what is happening? I really can't imagine being the person reviewing this security footage. So you're like, okay, we already have to figure out how this person died. And now you are like, okay, he got robbed. That's horrible. And then you see the worst thing you could possibly imagine.
I'm putting myself in the detective's shoes for a minute of, wait a minute, what? Rewind. Hold on. Go back as far as you can. And then seeing that. And, again, are you shocked? No, you're probably more laughing than shocked over it because of just what you're witnessing. But when you go back and look at video surveillances, there's so much other stuff you see. I mean, you see other crimes being committed, which is always interesting. You're focusing on one thing, and then across the street, you see like a shooting. You're like, oh, wait a minute, that happened too. So when it comes to just videos, anything's possible. But that story in the New York City subway system, it's just another story.
So would they come? I just want to know the procedure, just because I'm interested, though. So somebody will call 911 and say they found a dead body, and I know they'll send like EMS, even though the guy's clearly dead and all this stuff. So they'll send someone like you as a detective and say, here's the surveillance footage. And do you actually have to go to the subway and look at it, or they give you some kind of tape that you could view in your office?
It depends on the system. And that's exactly what happened. They'll call 911. EMS and the patrol guys will show up. They'll establish that he's dead. EMS will just say he's dead. You need the coroner to come to officially say he's dead, but EMS can kind of let you know. Then you would start, because it's a unusual circumstance, so you would start somewhat making a crime scene and roping some things off. A part of the platform, the car, obviously, that he was found in. And then the surveillance part of it is going to be up to the system that you have. Can it be transferred to a CD or DVD, that you could bring it with you to look at? Do you have to watch it in their system? All that. But you would have a starting point. You kind of work backwards. Okay, there he is dead. And then you would just kind of rewind it to a point of maybe seeing him come on. But then you go even further than that, Nicole, of where did he start walking from? Did anyone follow him? So you can't just say, all right, he's dead. There's a reason for it. And until the autopsy is done, and is a confirmed cause of death, you have to assume there was a crime committed. So you're going to keep backing up that video and even get additional videos from the street of, like I said, did he have a problem with anyone on the street? Did anyone follow him into the car? Was any of that happening? So there's a lot to do when it comes to piecing surveillance videos together from a starting point to the end of it.
So this guy they found out that the victim's 37 years old, and he's married and he has kids, but he had an estranged wife because apparently he was an alcoholic, but he was here from Mexico working, and they know that he had cirrhosis, at least from being an alcoholic. They did the autopsy and they don't know exactly how he died right now, which to me means they didn't see anything grossly or with their naked eye that determined, okay, hey, he had a pulmonary embolism and dropped dead. Because if you have cirrhosis and you're in end stage liver disease, you're not walking on a train and dying on the train. It just doesn't make you drop dead like that, kind of. So they're trying to figure out what happened, and he has this history of alcohol abuse, so he could potentially be into drugs now or something. I don't know what they're going to say, but they're saying that they don't know. Obviously, they're going to document that there was post-mortem sexual assault, which is terrible, but they'll also be able to get DNA from that, hopefully, and find this guy, because they've showed a clearer picture of him. I feel like they kind of might know who he is, but I'm not sure as of right now, that as of recording, that they've found who it is.
No, I don't think so.
It's just so freaking disturbing. And you're right. Nothing shocks you, because I would have sworn the worst thing that could ever happen was the guy that lit the lady on fire who was alive a couple months ago. And it's just weird that people are sitting around how could I one up that or something? It's so nuts.
Yeah. Go ahead, Maria.
sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, this kind of reminds me of this video we had in the gross room where this woman had got a detection alert in her backyard that somebody was there, and she was checking her ring footage and saw that a man went into her driveway and started using a cucumber to,
he stuck
pleasure
it
himself
in the grill of her car and was bent over in front of it. And this is what she's watching in her Ring camera.
And I'm just how many other horrific things like this are we just catching on camera when we're looking for something else?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Yeah.
That happens a lot, where you think it's one thing and then you start watching it and it's something completely different. But there's so many stories that are out there, and the subways are hard. It's going through a rough time, and this reminds me of the 70s and the 80s,
70s,
where you could not go on the subway. You just didn't ride the subway because of what was going on down there. But you have the mental health issue for people who are homeless or whoever it may be is an issue in New York. And you have people lit on fire. You got people getting pushed in front of trains that are just standing there. It's horrible. And every story is horrible. And like you said, the next one's going to be horrible. And the one after that's going to be horrible. And you just hope it gets to a point where it stops or slows down or something. Because like I said before, 90+% of the people in the subway are all good people. Going to work, going out to eat, going to a show, whatever it might be, that have to encounter this stuff.
So, speaking of mental health, because that will bring us to our last story that we wanted to talk about with you today, is this arson that happened at Governor Shapiro's mansion in the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania. And I guess the guy who got caught with this was dealing with some mental health issues as well.
I don't understand how this person got access to the property so easily.
First thing I said, I mean, me being in the profession that I'm in or was in, that was the very first thing. Not that he lit a fire, not that the governor had to get out of there. How do you get in? How do you
Exactly.
scale a fence with a security team there, get into the house? Just, I don't know. And I have no answer for that. And that
I
was,
I have a suspicion it's because the people that were watching it were on their phones. I'm sure of it. Like, are there rules that if you, I mean, I guess it's a private security probably, but are there rules? Because I swear to God, like, I drive around all the time and sometimes I see cops pulled over at the side of the road for whatever they're doing and they're like looking down in their lap at a phone. And I'm just like, really, like, it's, and this is not just cops, this is everybody in the world. It's everybody's checked out, you know?
yeah, I don't know. I don't know who the security team was, whether it's the Jersey State Police, which are like in New York. The New York State Police have the security detail for the governor. I don't know if that's the same thing in Pennsylvania, if they're involved or if it's a private company. But you know, they should have when you're dealing with protection of principles of that high level, governors, the president, all that. There's a zero failure mission. You can't fail. You can't not get something. You can't allow what happened to happen. You know, I don't care who it is, whether you like them or not, you can't have that occur because that breaks down the system of who, you know, what other things are going on that people aren't being protected that need to be protected. Then it also, what it does is you start the copycats. He got away with it. Let me try, you know, and someone might come through and actually succeed in what they want to do. And that's when you get into real big problems.
Oh, yeah.
It's weird because I was looking up. I just was curious about the house, like what it looked like, and it's 29,000 square feet. So it's huge. It's like
29,000 square feet?
it said 29,000 square feet. I don't know if that was the whole property because
That
a
seems
house.
insane.
Yeah, that's huge.
It does seem insane, but I don't know because there's like a museum and shit in there. Like people could go visit. There's tours.
It
They
should
have
be the
like
whole
artifacts
property.
on the first floor and stuff. So I don't know. Maybe it's the whole property, whatever. But regardless, I was looking it up and it had the address and directions. It's just like very easy for someone to go there. So you would think that it was like hard to get into if you're just telling people how to get there. It's very easily. I mean, they even have things how to get here from this highway and this highway. They're just like, hey, come over, tours, come look at this, come look at that. It's just like I don't know. It's just nuts. But the guy, so this is something I wanted to ask you because as soon as I heard about this happening on the news, I was on X or Twitter or whatever, and I'm seeing pictures of the guy who did it and his social media accounts and screenshots of his posts that he was making, and I didn't hear that guy's name for a very long time on the news. So what do you feel about all of these sleuths, internet sleuths, like looking up all of this information and posting it? Like, how does that affect your investigation and stuff when people are like putting stuff out there that you don't want out there yet?
Yeah, that becomes a big problem. And thankfully, when I was doing all that, none of this was around, you know, and it's more, you know, this day and age with private sleuths, which listen, if I know a few, you know, that have access to things because listen, they're not binded by the rules that we are. You know, they can have access to someone, knock on the door, and these people who are telling them information know they're not talking to the police. So it's a different conversation. You know, the ability to just show up and walk around. We have our tours that we do, and when we work, they don't. And the access and the I guess talent, I'll give it to them. The talent that they have investigating these things are incredible. Of what they think of and how they access this information is wild. But one of the conversations I had with one young woman who does it is she had a thing that if she found anything, she'd be in touch with the police. And I think that's important. Go
Yeah.
out and check out anything, because here I've said this on so many shows that the police can't be everywhere, but the public can. And if you have someone that's all into it and is doing some digging and finds some good stuff, do it. I don't care who you are. If I get to lock someone up and someone else help, great. That's awesome. So that's where I think detectives can play a role with some of these, sleuths that are going out there and have kind of that relationship with them. When you get into a murky waters when it's a ongoing case. So what I mean by that is, let's say serial killer or someone's missing or
like Brian Koberger or something.
right.
Well,
and
I
you
want to bring that up in a second.
and you get information that might be contradicting, what you're looking at. That's when it gets a little nutty. And that's when detectives and police departments get annoyed, because especially, listen, there's things with investigations, especially when it comes to, we just brought up before, like Night Stalker or Scott Peterson. There's so many times that the police have information, but will never put it out there because it's going to impact that person's actions, them getting notified that they are a subject of the investigation or anything like that. That's when it gets really bad, because that's going to make a dramatic impact on the investigation, and that's what you never want as a detective.
Well, I think, like you're saying, the really positive example of this we've seen is like Michelle McNamara working with the police to help solve the Golden State Killer case. But then we have the negative side of it with Koberger, for example. Remember that TikToker had been accusing a professor of killing the 4 kids, and now that person is going after the TikToker because obviously we know that did not happen at this point, or that professor is not the leading suspect at this time, and you're essentially ruining that person's life with allegations like that. So people are really reckless with the information they post sometimes.
No doubt. And they lose the fact that you're not in the police department. You're not part of this. You're on your own. And the information you put out there is going to come back to you. So listen, you want to post stuff, you damn well better be right. And, get either authorization or corroboration of it or whatever. But it's your responsibility. If you're going to go out there saying stuff and pinpointing people's names and what they did, that is so dangerous on every level. That's bad.
Agree.
I think it drives people nuts when they, because I know for me, like, especially when the Brian Koberger thing happened, it's like, it happened right before Thanksgiving, right? And we didn't find out until New Year's Eve, around New Year's Eve time. All that time passed, and then people are just like, what's going on? We need to know. The public wants to hear, like, and I don't even live around there, so it doesn't affect me at all, but I just want to know because I'm curious,
Because you're nosy.
Because I'm nosy. But, like, people start getting antsy because they think that the police department is not doing a good job when they were the whole time. They just were, like, keeping their mouth shut. Like you were saying, Tom, like, the guy was on the loose still, and they were trying to get him. But that's what makes people start, like, I mean, there were just like rando influencers just showing up in Moscow, Idaho, and like,
I mean, Nancy was posted up on a folding table in front of the house for like a week. So
yeah, but at least she does this as a living. Like, I'm just saying, like, just people are, it's just crazy how like people are becoming internet detectives like that.
yeah.
Well, why social media?
Yeah,
Yeah,
You didn't have
exactly.
these, you had a Nancy Drew and the Hardy Boys when we were kids, and it was a TV show. You didn't have this because, a lot of people, unfortunately, some are into it and it's a kind of passion they have or hobby or whatever, which is fine. But there's other people out there that want views and they want clicks and they want this and that. And that's where it becomes a problem with showing up to scenes and talking to people maybe you shouldn't be talking to. It's all about that wow factor on social media. And that's when, things can go wrong real quick. And investigations, listen, the smallest detail can spin an investigation on its head and either make it or ruin it in a blink of an eye.
Yeah, I know that's true. Jeez, the internet is just like the best and worst thing ever. I say that every day. All right, we want to know, like, where could everybody reach you? Obviously, the Gold Shields podcast. Do you have social media that you do that you want to
No, we
shout
have
out?
none. We just sit in the closet. Nope. Yes, we have our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/@goldshields. All our shows are on there. Instagram at the Gold Shield Show, our website, thegoldshieldshow.com, and every audio channel you can think of. We're on some that we don't even know we're on, which is always fun to get that email of, hey, you reached this amount. We're like, okay, cool, thank you. But it's a great ride, and thank you so much for letting me do that, because that's what this is all about. Just trying to entertain more and more people and get some cool stories out to them. So that's all our contacts. And give us a shout. Follow us, subscribe to us, all that good stuff.
And we'll forgive your Yankees hat on today's episode, because
Yes.
normally we'd never allow that.
I did that on purpose.
Well,
Sorry.
if it was, it's so funny because when I came home from our dinner, I was telling Gabe about you, and I was just like, well, listen, like, the good news is at least he's a Yankees fan and he's not a Mets fan. And then Gabe's like, yeah, I saw his hat. Like, he just like zones in on things like that. But yeah, as long as if it was a Mets hat, we might have had to have a conversation with you before we got on. But
I don't think in my lifetime, I don't think I've ever worn a Met hat, so you don't have to worry about that.
you have to come you and your wife have to come to a game with us, because I saw that we're playing the Yankees a couple times coming up this summer. So we should all get together and have like a night at the stadium.
That's
you can come up
easy.
there too, whatever you want to do.
That's easy. Let's set it up.
All right,
Without a doubt.
awesome. All right,
Definitely.
cool.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tom, for coming on this show. This was such a fun conversation. Don't forget, this is the last day to enter for the 1 million download giveaway, and we're going to announce the winners next week.
Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor, and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day, and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.